In this video, we explore a shocking story of misplaced trust. She thought she was living in a safe home, but behind closed doors lurked a terrifying secret. A simple house stood in the southern part of Dublin in a place called Mountain View Park. People who used to be married, their son Richard, their daughter Louise, her sons and daughters, and her current partner all lived under the same roof. Even though the house wasn't very big, there were always at least 10 people living there at once. Everyday problems quickly turned into ongoing fights and constant stress in such a small space. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? Whether you're watching from home, work, or on the go. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories reach, and if you're enjoying this deep dive into true crime, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, let's get back into the case. Patricia O'Connor had worked as a care assistant in the city hospital for all of her working life. She was strict, quiet, and worn out from all the things that life had to offer. The house they were living in was paid for with her own savings. She had raised her family and lived there for most of her life. She moved out for a while after getting divorced from Augustine Gus O'Connor. She started dating someone new and had been living alone for a while, but when that relationship didn't work out, she went back because she had nowhere else to live. That's right, Gus let her move back in. They lived together under the same roof, like distant roommates, barely talking, but sharing the same place. Even though they were no longer together, everyone knew Gus as a quiet, shy man, so he kept to himself. It was rare for him to help out around the house or get involved in fights. Some people around him liked how indifferent he was, but it made things worse at home, where things were already tense. Patricia and her daughter Louise had a rough time together. Louise lived there with her 5 sons and girls, all of whom had different dads. Her mother and she often fought because she didn't work or help out around the house. Stephanie, one of her teenage children, was quiet and kept to herself a lot of the time. The others were younger and didn't get involved in the fights at home, but they did live in the same stressed environment. Along with Louise, Kieran Green, who is now her boyfriend, lived in the house. He didn't have a job, was moody, and often behaved badly and aggressively. He and Patricia were always fighting. He didn't follow her rules, stayed out of chores, and gave off a vibe that she didn't trust. It had been cold and tense between them from the start. Besides living there full-time, Keith Johnston, Louise's ex-partner and the father of her 2 oldest children, often came to visit. He wasn't really living there, but he went there a lot. For a long time, no one knew what he was doing around the house, but it turned out that he knew a lot more than anyone thought. People who used to be married lived together with their grown daughter, 5 grandkids, her partner, and a man who used to be their son-in-law. Patricia still did most of the housework even though she was getting older. All by herself, she cooked, cleaned, and took care of everything. The others did what they were supposed to do and rarely offered to help. It wasn't up to Gus, Louise, or Kieran to do anything. The house was too small, too noisy, and too hard to run. Patricia started to feel like she was losing control of the house over time. She was no longer heard by anyone. Anytime she tried to set limits, she was met with anger or rolling of the eyes. The house she had built and taken care of seemed to turn its back on her now. Patricia felt like she no longer belonged there, but no one said it out loud. Being left out in silence was the first red flag. People didn't want to change anything, but they also didn't want to follow anyone else's rules. Patricia never asked for something that wasn't fair. She only asked that you respect her by doing simple things like picking up after yourself, not leaving dirty dishes lying around, and sticking to a daily schedule. She got nothing back but silence, avoidance, and a hint of passive anger. The other adults didn't pay any attention to her. It was thought of as annoying to keep reminding her, so she wasn't admired for it. Kieran made it a point to stay away from her. It seemed like he wasn't hearing her, even when she spoke right to him. Louise didn't do anything. She would either shut down mentally when things got tough or say her mom was being too strict. Patricia could not depend on anyone. Nobody else tried to clean up the house. She was the only one who did. No one stuck to Patricia's daily plan, even though she tried to stick to it. She got up early to take care of the garden, cook breakfast, and do the laundry. The others slept in, made messes, and didn't care about her attempts to keep things in order. Even the kids who lived there seemed to know that the rules didn't really matter there. There was no longer a family unit. No one cared about each other as they went about their own daily lives. There were no shared conversations, and neither everyday things nor emotional problems were talked about. A place that used to bring people together, like a home, was now broken up. They had the same amount of space, but not the same amount of worry. At first, May 29th, 2017 didn't stand out. There were no loud fights, calls to the police, or reports of yelling. But Patricia O'Connor stopped leaving the house on that day. She stopped picking up the phone. No one saw her at any of the places she usually went. Even with these sudden changes, no one in her close group seemed to think her disappearance was a big deal. Valerie, Patricia's sister, was the first person to sound the alarm. After a few days, she ran into Gus while walking her dog near the O'Connor house. He remarked in passing that Patricia had left the house with a suitcase and never came back while they were talking. He said that took place in the evening of May 29th. He also said that Kieran and Richard had already called the cops. Valerie didn't agree with this reasoning. She knew a lot about her sister. It wasn't like her to leave without warning or any warning. Patricia would not have left her grandchildren and great-grandchildren behind without saying anything. She'd never been seen or heard from again, was always in touch, and never made snap choices. When the Irish police got the report of a missing person, they did what they always do and checked hospitals, hotels, and neighborhood shelters, but every lead turned out to be false. The bank card that Patricia had not been used. Her phone hadn't made any calls, and there was no sign of her after the time she was said to have left. Nobody saw it, not a single thing. Investigators asked Louise for a picture of her mother so they could send out a warning to everyone. This was the first time that people outside of Patricia's family heard about her missing. No one outside of her close family had known she was missing until that point. Things didn't seem right at all. Even though someone was missing, no one seemed to be scared. There was no plan for a search. Family members who lived in other parts of Ireland began to act on their own. They tried calling each other, friends, and people in the area, and even the media, but nothing came up. Mary had not been seen by anyone. They looked at her habits again and tried to figure out what paths she might have taken, but they couldn't find anything. It's been almost a week. No one had looked in the house she was said to have left. A break-in wasn't seen, and there were no reports of threats or violence to the cops. The little information that was provided wasn't enough to officially say that her disappearance was suspicious, but there was also no evidence that she had left on her own. After that, detectives started to doubt what the family said happened. There was no clear time frame for when Patricia was said to have left, and no one could confirm seeing her that day. Even the claim that she left with a suitcase was not backed up by video or evidence from someone else. In the beginning of the investigation, solid proof was hard to come by, and Patricia's closest friends and family didn't want to help. At first, it looked like a senior citizen was lost, but things started to look different. There was more going on than the quiet front let on. No one in the family said anything about the house being watched from a nearby property. There were security cameras on one of the close buildings that could see both the front and backyards. They were known to everyone in the area, even the O'Connor family. Police got the video a few days after Patricia was reported missing. What they found was shocking. At about 9:34 a.m. on May 29th, a woman with a bag was seen leaving the house. Her walk down the street was calm, and she came back from a different way about 30 minutes later. At first glance, it looked like someone was leaving on a trip, but when I looked more closely, I saw something strange. The girl in the video wasn't Patricia. Stephanie, her niece, was there. She wore Patricia's clothes and moved slowly, as if she didn't want to draw attention to herself. These acts were planned ahead of time. Surveillance footage from a neighbor showed more than just an unsuccessful attempt to fake Patricia's exit on her own. It showed that several family members were acting together. The moment Stephanie came back through the backyard was very important proof. The plan was to make it look like Patricia had left on her own, which would trick the police and delay any quick search of the house. When the records were looked at again, they showed that Patricia had never left the house, not on May 29, and not before that either. It was also found that someone in the family had used her cell phone to send texts after that date, making it look like she was on a trip. The public didn't know about this right away, but it later became part of the charges of obstruction of justice. Every adult who lived there had a part to play. Kieran told the police that Patricia had left. Louise backed up the same story with a picture. It was said again by Gus, who didn't show any doubt. They didn't question the truth of what was said to have happened, even though none of them had seen Patricia that day. A big part of how they acted was that they coordinated their silence and told each other the same story about what happened. Investigators found problems with what they said. Louise said that her mother's departure didn't come as a surprise and brought up old problems, but she couldn't name a specific event. Patrick had said she was going to leave, but Gus didn't know where she would have gone. Kieran said that a stressful situation in the house might be the reason. At the same time, other things didn't make sense. Patricia didn't seem to have packed to leave. Everything she owned, including her clothes, medicines, personal papers and bank card, was still there. This was the exact opposite of what was said about her claimed plan to leave. The people around her hadn't seen her leave. There wasn't a cab, a bus, or even a person walking by who could confirm that she was leaving. The trick fell apart quickly. As soon as Patricia was officially reported missing and the public was asked to help, new information began to come in. Some people who saw what happened said that Kieran and Louise had been acting strangely. They stayed away from people, didn't ask for help, and didn't seem to care. All of this led to one scary truth. Patricia didn't leave by herself. Through the first few days, it was clear that her absence was a lie to hide something much worse. In County Wicklow on June 10, 2017, a family that had been on a vacation was getting ready to go home along an old road called Military Road. As one of them looked for a lost item in the thicket next to the road, they saw something strange in the tall grass and brush. At first, they thought it was animal bones, but when they looked more closely, it was sad to see that it was a human body part. The police were called right away to the scene. What happened next was a huge, well-planned operation. The place was made safe. Aerial help was brought in along with military units and defense staff. Over the next few days, more body parts were found lying around on the side of the road. There were more than 100 people involved in total. Over the course of about 15 miles, investigators found the body parts in 9 different places. At first, it was hard to identify anyone. Authorities thought the remains belonged to a man based on their shape and the first things they saw. That thought changed, though, as more pieces were found. After some time, forensic experts confirmed that the victim was a woman over 60 years old. But right away, there was no link made to any active missing person cases. The lack of papers, clothes, or other personal things found with the body parts made it harder to identify the person. Each piece was wrapped in its own plastic bag. Investigators think the body had been cut up and thrown away within 24 hours of being found because there were few signs of animal activity or rot. The state of the body parts suggested that someone had tried to slow down the decomposition process, possibly by burying them or exposing them to cold. In Dublin, the search for Patricia O'Connor was still going on because the body had not been formally identified yet. Neither case had been tied yet. The police were still looking into the idea that Patricia had left on her own. The big step forward came 3 days later, on June 12, 2017. Lady Anne Green went into a police station. The way he looked sent up red flags. He was upset, talking quickly, and often contradicting himself. He said that he was Louise O'Connor's partner and that he was responsible for the death of her mother. Right away, he made it clear that he had moved in self-defense. He said that he and Patricia had a fight that turned physical. He said Patricia came into the bathroom while he was showering with a wooden stick and started yelling at him. He replied that he had pushed her away, which made her hit her head and lose consciousness. He then talked about what he did next. He said that he put her body in his car, drove to the country, and buried her in a homemade grave because he was scared. A few days later, he said he went back to the scene of the crime, dug up the body, cut it up, and threw the pieces in different out-of-the-way places in the Wicklow Mountains so no one would find out what had happened. He said he did it by himself and hadn't told anyone. Investigators heard him, but they were wary of what he said. The order of events was the first red flag. Green said that everything had happened without planning it. But in the places where the bodies were found, there were clear signs of planning ahead. The body parts were put in strong plastic bags, and some were hidden in places that were hard to get to. Forensics also showed that the head had multiple injuries that could not have been caused by a single fall. There were cut marks on the bones that showed that power tools were used. Different kinds of tools were used which didn't match Kieran's account of what happened. Some of the cuts were smooth and had the vibrations you'd expect from a motorized saw. It became clear very quickly that the body may have been buried at first, but that it had to be taken apart and moved later, which took time, work, and planning. This didn't sound like spontaneous panic at all. It seemed like a high level of awareness and purpose. The police started to look through nearby hardware stores for items that might have been bought with the crime in mind. People asked for surveillance video and records of transactions, especially ones that had to do with Kieran's family or friends. At the same time, agents turned their attention back to how other people living in the house were acting. Stephanie had been caught on video wearing Patricia's clothes before, which had been thought to be a joke. Now she was being closely watched. Investigators were looking at her movements to see if she might have been trying to deliberately mislead them. It was also called into question how Louise was acting. There were between her mother and her partner, but she didn't do anything about it. People thought that the things she said before were not full and sometimes went against each other. Because Kieran told the police what she did, they began a much bigger probe. The police looked at not only him but also everyone who was days before Patricia went missing. No longer was the event seen as a terrible mistake. There were signs that more than one person was involved and that they were working together to hide a major crime. The next step in the investigation was to see if there were any ties between Kieran and other guys in the family. That made everyone look at Keith Johnston, who used to be with Louise. Even though he didn't live in the house full-time, he kept in touch with Louise and visited often. Investigators found that Keith and Kieran had gone shopping together at a home improvement store not long before the event. They were seen on security video buying saws, heavy-duty bags, chemical cleaners, and safety gloves together. The things had been bought after Patricia was said to have died, which was found out when the purchases were looked at again. This went against the story of fear and pointed to action that was planned ahead of time. A new idea that made sense came up. The tearing apart wasn't a desperate act. The crime was meant to be hidden on purpose. Later, a tip from a stranger led police to a possible dump spot near the Daughter River. 2 electric saws and an axe were found by a specialized search team that went through the area. Forensic tests proved that the tools were used to cut up the body. On one of the blades, pieces of bone that matched Patricia's body were found. Everyone in the house was brought in again to be questioned. Louise changed how she spoke. She used to say Patricia had left on her own, but now she said she had only believed what Kieran told her and didn't know the whole story. The interview went on for a long time. She said Stephanie was only helping because she was asked to, and that Gus hadn't seen anything strange. At the same time, Richard, Patricia's son, said something different. He told police that his mother never left the house on the day she went missing, and the suitcase that was used to fake her exit was later found in his dad's room. Richard's statement was very important. He was the only family member who wasn't part of the plot. He agreed that Louise had told him that their mother wanted to leave, which was an attempt to stop him from calling the police. Investigators were sure that this behavior showed that more than one person was trying to hide the crime. The police publicly declared all 9 places where body parts were found to be crime scenes by writing down information about them. Police found the house as well as areas with trees, the original burial spot, and places along the road where body parts had been spread out. It became clear that there had been a crime, dismemberment, transportation, a fake disappearance, and a deal to keep quiet. The probe into Patricia O'Connor's death began in Dublin on January 14th, 2020. There were charges against Karen Green, Louise O'Connor, Stephanie O'Connor, Keith Johnston, and Augustine O'Connor. Each was accused of a different level of involvement, from committing the crime to trying to hide it and getting in the way of the investigation. Because there was so much proof, the judge said the case would be long and hard to understand. The prosecutor gave a full account of what happened. Their version of events says Patricia died in the house on May 29, 2017 at night. She died after Kieran hit her several times in the head, killing her. After being hidden, the body was later cut up and taken to faraway places. The cover-up began that same day. Street cameras caught Stephanie dressing up in clothes that belonged to her grandma. Later, the suitcase that was used to fake Patricia's exit was found in the house, which went against the claim that she had left on her own. The defense quickly turned to limiting the harm. Kieran changed his story at trial after having admitted the crime before. He said that he hadn't done the act and that the family had only asked him to take the blame. He said that Augustine was the real bad guy because he and Patricia had a big fight and Augustine hit Patricia with a club. Kieran says that Louise got him to admit after the event in exchange for her support. Kieran had stuck to his original confession for more than 2 years, so this rapid change came as a surprise. Louise said she had no idea that her mother had died or that Kieran had done what he did. She said Stephanie was part of the fake scene because she believed what her partner told her and had no reason to doubt it. But the prosecution showed Richard's comments in which he said that his sister was involved in hiding the crime. The prosecution showed camera footage of Kieran and Keith buying things like saws, heavy-duty bags, and more. They also showed film of the vehicle that was used to move the bodies. Multiple hard force injuries to the head and dismemberment done with power tools were confirmed in separate medical reports. This directly contradicted the claim that Patricia's death was caused by an accident. During the hearings, the defense tried to make the court doubt the reliability of the surveillance footage, but the court didn't buy their claims. Some of the accused were also tried to be blamed for something else. Each suspect tried to play down their part. Augustine, Louise, and Keith were blamed by Kieran. Louise said Kieran was to blame. Stephanie said she did what her mother told her to do. Keith said he had no idea what the tools were for. Augustine said that all he did was believe what his daughter told him. The prosecution stressed how well planned the lie was and how everyone in the family worked together to hide the crime. According to the evidence, everyone in the house knew about Patricia's death, but kept it a secret on purpose, telling the same stories to trick the police. The result was easy to see. This wasn't a scary time. A group of people worked together to try to hide a crime. The sentence was given on January 23, 2020. The person who killed Patricia O'Connor was found to be Kieran Green. The lack of self-defense, the dismemberment, and the attempt to trick detectives were all things that made things worse. He was given a life sentence in jail with the chance of getting out before 2040. The granddaughter of Patricia, Stephanie O'Connor, got 18 months in jail. She was found guilty of lying to the police by taking part in the fake exit. Watch a video of her carrying a bag while dressed in Patricia's clothes. The defense said she was just doing what her mother told her to do, but the court said her actions were planned and deliberate. Louise O'Connor got 2 years and 10 months in prison. The court said she'd slowed down the justice system, planned to lie, and hidden proof. She also put a lot of stress on other family members and tried to stop her brother from calling the police, which was represented in her sentence. Louise said she wasn't guilty, but her reasons didn't make sense when looked at against the facts. Keith Johnston, who used to be with Louise, got 2 years and 10 months in prison. Surveillance video shown in court proved that he bought the tools that were used to cut up the body. However, the court found no proof that he actually did the act, but it did find that he actively helped hide the crime. Before the trial even started, Augustine O'Connor admitted that he had lied to the police. That's right. He admitted that he knew Patricia was missing, but had believed the lie that she had left on her own. Because of this, he got 18 months in jail. The court decided that he would be available for parole after 1 year, because of his age and the fact that he had helped the police in some ways. The real time served was not the same as the sentences that were given. Stephanie was freed after only 8 months. After she was freed, she didn't say anything in public and stayed out of the spotlight totally. Augustine did his time for about 13 months before he was also let go. Louise got out of jail in May 2022 after being locked up for just under 2 years. She got a place to live through a government program for helping people who have been in prison. Keith got out of jail in September 2022. He was captured by the media in public places, and he didn't seem sorry or upset. Because of this, Kieran Green is the only person still serving a full term. He is still locked up in a high-security jail. Extremely few people think that he will be freed early before 2040. The court decided that everyone who was found guilty did what they did not to help with the crime, but to hide it. Even though their level of participation was different, every adult in the house took part in the lie and the group effort to avoid responsibility. No one knew that Patricia O'Connor had been buried. Small groups of family members were the only ones who were asked to the private service. Not a single one of her sisters knew. Family members only learned about the burial through news stories that came out after it had already happened. People who used to work with her, live nearby, or be friends with her from childhood were not allowed to attend. The event wasn't open to the public at first because it was supposed to promote peace, but it became clear over time that this was part of a larger effort to erase Patricia's memory. Keeping her closest family members from the funeral showed how badly things had broken down in the family and showed that some people were still trying to avoid public attention after the trial. After he got out of jail, Augustine O'Connor got the house where Patricia had died, and the money she had in her bank accounts. He sold the house for a good amount of money a few months later. Even though Louise was her daughter, she got nothing. The official death letter didn't even say her name. Richard says that their father blamed Louise for mental abuse and left her out of the will on purpose. Augustine never made peace with his daughter, his grandchildren, or his great-grandchildren before he died in 2022. His final choices only proved that he was no longer connected to the people involved in the case. Keith Johnston didn't say much about what happened after he got out of jail. The paparazzi took pictures of him several times in public. He looked calm and didn't show any signs of regret or mental stress. Many people thought that the punishments given to him and the others were way too light for how bad the crimes were. No public event was ever held to honor Patricia. Her name didn't show up in neighborhood records or memorials. People who knew her remembered her as someone who cared about others their whole lives, only to be hurt and left alone at the end. Even though words were given, the story left a scary question unanswered. None of the people who were found guilty ever gave a full explanation for why they thought Patricia should be removed. The most upsetting part was still unsolved. What kind of terrible things could happen to the family she had spent her whole life with? This was a disturbing case, but one that won't be forgotten. Share what you think in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more true crime. Stay safe until the next